planet Katal, a serene world inhabited by the advanced yet peaceful Nor civilization, had been transformed into a war-torn landscape. The sky, once a tranquil shade of lavender, was now darkened by the silhouettes of human warships. Explosions thundered in the distance, sending tremors through the ground and shattering the quiet beauty of the crystal towers and lush gardens that characterized the capital city. Captain Jack Harper, a seasoned soldier of the human military, led his squad through the chaos. His mission was clear: crush the Nor resistance and secure the city. As they advanced through the shattered streets, Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The Nor, though technologically advanced, were not warriors. They were scholars, artists, and engineers, unprepared for the ruthless onslaught of the human invasion. "Harper, we've got movement up ahead," said Sergeant Mitchell, his voice tense over the comms. Jack moved forward, peering around a corner to see a group of Nor civilians huddled together. Their eyes were wide with fear, and their bodies trembled as they clung to each other for comfort. Among them was a young woman with striking blue hair and large, expressive eyes. Her presence was magnetic, a combination of grace and desperation that caught Jack's attention immediately. "We need to move them to a safe zone," Jack said, though he knew there was no true safety left in this city. His orders were to show no mercy, to crush any resistance. But as he looked into the eyes of the young woman, he felt a tug at his conscience. "Please, don't hurt us," the young woman pleaded, her voice trembling but steady. "We are not your enemies. We just want to live." Jack hesitated. His training screamed at him to ignore her, to see her as nothing more than another obstacle to mission success. But something about her struck a chord deep within him. "Captain, what do we do with them?" Mitchell asked, his rifle trained on the group. Jack swallowed hard. The image of the young woman's face, filled with fear, yet somehow still hopeful, haunted him. He knew what he had to do, even if it went against everything he had been taught. "We'll detain them for now," Jack decided, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. "Mitchell, secure them and take them to the holding area. We'll figure out what to do with them later." As his squad moved to secure the civilians, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he was making a grave mistake. He had seen enough bloodshed to last a lifetime, and the thought of adding more innocent lives to the tally made him sick to his stomach. "Thank you," the young woman said softly as she was led away, her eyes meeting Jack's once more. "You have a kind heart." Jack nodded, unable to find the words to respond. He watched her disappear into the shadows, a small part of him hoping that she would find some measure of safety amidst the chaos. The squad continued their march through the city, the streets lined with the remnants of Nor culture. Statues of revered ancestors stood silent amidst the rubble, their once proud visages now marred by the violence that had swept through the city. Jack felt a pang of regret as he stepped over broken pottery and shattered murals, the beauty of this world overshadowed by the grim reality of war. "Harper, we've got new orders," Mitchell's voice crackled through the comms, snapping Jack out of his thoughts. "Command wants us to round up any remaining civilians and take them to the main square for processing." Jack's jaw tightened. Processing was a euphemism for execution, and he knew it. The thought of these peaceful people being herded like cattle to their deaths made his blood boil. As they moved through the city, Jack's resolve hardened. He couldn't stand by and watch innocent lives be extinguished. He had to do something, anything, to stop this madness. The squad rounded a corner and entered a small courtyard. There, in the center, stood a makeshift execution platform. A single Nor prisoner was kneeling before it, her hands bound behind her back and her head bowed. The executioner stood nearby, a massive axe gleaming in the dim light. "Prepare her for execution," barked the commanding officer, and the executioner stepped forward, raising the axe high above his head. "Wait!" Jack's voice cut through the tension, causing everyone to pause. He pushed through the crowd and stood before the young woman, his heart pounding in his chest. "Captain Harper, what are you doing?" the officer demanded, his face twisted with anger. "She's not a threat," Jack said, his voice firm. "She's just a civilian. Let her go." The officer sneered. "This is war, Harper. We don't show mercy to the enemy." Jack's heart raced. He couldn't let this happen. "I'm not asking. I'm ordering you to release her." The officer's eyes narrowed. "You're overstepping your authority, Captain." "Maybe," Jack said, stepping closer to the officer. "But I'm not going to stand by and watch an innocent person be decapitated." The officer's face contorted with rage, but before he could respond, Jack drew his sidearm and pointed it at the executioner. Drop the axe, he commanded, his voice cold and steady. The executioner hesitated, then slowly lowered the axe and stepped back. Jack quickly moved to untie the young woman's hands, helping her to her feet. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes filled with gratitude and disbelief. "Go," Jack said, nodding towards a darkened alley. "Get out of here." She turned and ran, disappearing into the shadows as the officer glared at Jack. "You've made a big mistake, Harper." Jack holstered his weapon and faced the officer, his expression unyielding. "I can live with that." As he watched the young woman vanish into the night, Jack knew there was no turning back. He had crossed a line, defied orders, and saved a life. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he had done the right thing. The night on Catal was colder than usual, the air filled with tension and the distant sounds of battle. Jack Harper and the young Norwoman, Alara, moved through the dimly lit alleys, each step a test of their resolve and a reminder of the danger that followed close behind. "We need to find a safe place to hide," Jack said, scanning the surroundings for any sign of pursuit. His military instincts were on high alert, every shadow and sound a potential threat. Alara, still shaken from her near execution, nodded silently. Her blue hair glowed faintly in the moonlight, and her large eyes darted nervously around. "Why are you helping me?" she finally asked, her voice barely audible. Jack paused, glancing back at her. "I couldn't just stand by and watch you die. It's not right. Not like that." They continued their cautious journey through the labyrinthine streets of the city, avoiding main roads and sticking to the shadows. Jack's thoughts raced as he considered their next move. They couldn't stay in the city. The human forces would be searching for them, and the Nor resistance, though weakened, was still a dangerous unknown. "We need to get out of the city," Jack said decisively. "There's an old transport hub on the outskirts. If we can reach it, we might find a way off this planet." Alara's eyes widened with hope. "Do you think we can make it?" "We have to try," Jack replied. "Staying here isn't an option." Their journey was fraught with peril. At every turn, they encountered signs of the brutal conflict that had engulfed Catal. Buildings lay in ruins, their walls scarred by gunfire and explosions. The once bustling markets were now deserted, the remnants of stalls and goods scattered across the streets. As they made their way through the devastated city, they came across a group of Nor civilians hiding in a basement. The fear in their eyes was palpable, and Jack knew they couldn't ignore them. "Stay here, I'll check it out," Jack said, motioning for Alara to wait while he approached the group cautiously. One of the Nor, an older man with a weary expression, stepped forward. "Please don't hurt us. We just want to survive." Jack shook his head. "I'm not here to hurt you. We're trying to get out of the city. Do you know a safe way to the transport hub?" The man nodded slowly. "There's a tunnel system that leads out of the city. It's dangerous, but it's the only way." "Thank you," Jack said, noting the man's instructions. He turned back to Alara. "We have a way out. Let's move." They followed the directions through a series of tunnels, their progress slow but steady. The darkness was oppressive, and the air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. The tunnels were narrow, forcing them to move single file, their footsteps echoing eerily in the confined space. "Jack," Alara said softly, her voice tinged with fear. "Do you think we'll make it?" Jack looked back at her, seeing the anxiety in her eyes. "We'll make it," he said firmly, though he wasn't sure if he believed it himself. "We have to." As they navigated the tunnels, they heard the distant rumble of machinery and the occasional shout of soldiers. Jack's grip tightened on his rifle, his senses heightened by the constant threat of discovery. They reached a junction where the tunnel split into several directions. Jack paused, considering their options. "Which way?" Alara asked, her voice trembling. Jack scanned the tunnels, trying to recall the directions. "This way," he said, choosing the path that led deeper underground. It was a risk, but it seemed the least likely to be guarded. They moved quickly, the sound of their breathing loud in the oppressive silence. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, dimly lit by flickering lights. Jack signaled for Alara to stay back as he crept forward to scout the area. He froze as he spotted a patrol of human soldiers near an exit. His heart pounded as he considered their options. They couldn't turn back, and they couldn't fight their way through. "Stay here," he whispered to Alara. "I'll create a distraction." "No, Jack," she protested, grabbing his arm. "It's too dangerous." "We don't have a choice," Jack said, his voice calm but determined. "I'll draw them away and you slip past." Once you're out, find a way to the surface and head to the transport hub. Alera's eyes filled with tears. But what about you? I'll catch up, Jack promised, though he knew the odds were slim. Now go, before they see us. He took a deep breath and stepped into the light, shouting at the soldiers, "Over here, intruders!" The soldiers turned, startled, and Jack fired a few shots into the air, drawing their attention. He ducked behind a pillar as they rushed toward him, their shouts echoing through the chamber. Alera watched in horror as Jack disappeared into the chaos, her heart aching with fear and gratitude. She waited until the soldiers were fully distracted, then slipped through the exit, her steps quick and silent. She navigated the remaining tunnels with a mix of fear and determination, finally emerging into the night air. The city lay in ruins behind her, but ahead was the transport hub and a chance at freedom. Alera paused, looking back one last time. "Thank you, Jack," she whispered, then turned and ran towards the hub, her mind set on finding a way off this forsaken planet. Alera's breath came in ragged gasps as she sprinted towards the transport hub, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. The faint sounds of pursuit echoed in the distance, reminding her that safety was still far from assured. The ruins of Catal lay in stark contrast to the vibrant life that once thrived here, and every step she took through the debris felt like a step closer to both freedom and despair. She paused for a moment to catch her breath, glancing back over her shoulder. Jack had created a distraction that allowed her to escape, but the thought of what might happen to him filled her with dread. "Stay focused," she told herself, pushing forward. The transport hub was her only hope, and she had to keep moving. As she approached the hub, she saw the towering remnants of what was once a bustling center of activity. Now it stood as a silent sentinel in the chaos, its platforms and corridors empty and eerie in the dim light. Alera moved cautiously, her eyes scanning for any sign of danger. Suddenly, a hand clamped down on her shoulder, and she spun around to see a group of Nor rebels. Their leader, a stern-faced man with a scar running down his cheek, eyed her with suspicion. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice harsh. "This place is dangerous." I need to get to the transport hub," Alera stammered, her mind racing. "I have to get off this planet." The man narrowed his eyes. "And why should we trust you? You're running, just like the rest of us." Alera took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "I was saved by a human soldier," she said, her voice trembling. "He risked his life to help me escape. We need to find a way off this planet before it's too late." The man's expression softened slightly, but he remained wary. "A human saved you? Why would he do that?" "I don't know," Alera admitted, "but he's different. He doesn't want to see innocent people die." The leader glanced at his comrades, then back at Alera. "All right, we'll help you. But if you're lying, there will be consequences." Alera nodded, relief washing over her. "Thank you. We have to hurry." As they moved towards the transport hub, Alera couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The silence was oppressive, and the shadows seemed to shift and move around them. She tightened her grip on her makeshift weapon, ready for anything. They reached the hub and found a small group of Nor civilians huddled together, their faces filled with fear and exhaustion. Alera's heart ached for them, knowing that they had endured so much suffering. "We need to get to the transport ship," the leader said, his voice low. "Stay close and stay quiet." They moved through the hub, their footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. As they approached the docking area, Alera's heart sank. The ship was surrounded by human soldiers, their weapons trained on the entrance. "We're trapped," one of the rebels whispered, his voice tinged with panic. "What do we do?" "We fight," the leader said, his jaw set. "It's our only chance." Alera felt a surge of fear, but she knew they had no other choice. She glanced around, looking for a way to flank the soldiers. "There," she said, pointing to a maintenance tunnel. "We can use that to get behind them." The leader nodded, and they quickly made their way to the tunnel. As they crawled through the narrow space, Alera's mind raced with thoughts of Jack. She prayed he was safe, that he had somehow managed to escape the chaos. They emerged from the tunnel behind the soldiers, and the rebels launched their attack. The sound of gunfire and shouts filled the air as the two sides clashed in a desperate struggle. Alera fought with everything she had, her fear giving way to a fierce determination to survive. But despite their efforts, the rebels were quickly overwhelmed. The soldiers were well-trained and heavily armed, and the Nor resistance was no match for their superior firepower. Alera was captured and dragged towards the ship, her heart sinking as she realized their plan had failed. The soldiers pushed her into a holding cell, and she slumped to the floor, tears streaming down her face. As she sat in the darkness, the door to the cell creaked open, and a figure stepped inside. Alara's eyes widened in surprise as she recognized the man who had captured her. "Jack?" she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. Jack nodded, his expression grim. "I couldn't leave you behind," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I had to find you." Alara's heart swelled with gratitude and relief. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "I thought I was going to die." Jack knelt beside her, his eyes filled with determination. "We're not out of this yet," he said, "but we'll find a way, I promise." As they sat together in the darkness, Alara couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Despite the odds, despite the danger that surrounded them, she knew that as long as they were together, they had a chance. But as the door to the cell slammed shut, Alara's heart sank. The soldiers had betrayed them, and now they were trapped, with no way out. The only question was, how long would they survive? The transport ship's engines roared to life, a low hum filling the darkened corridors. Alara and Jack sat in the cold, dimly lit cell, the reality of their situation weighing heavily on their minds. The hope they once clung to seemed to wane with each passing moment, replaced by a creeping sense of dread. Jack broke the silence, his voice a whisper. "We need to find a way out of here. They won't keep us alive for long." Alara nodded, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. "Do you think they'll execute us?" Jack's jaw tightened. "I'm afraid so. They'll want to make an example out of us, especially you, as a Nor rebel." The door to the cell creaked open, and two heavily armed soldiers stepped inside. "Harper, Alara," one of them barked. "You're coming with us." Jack and Alara exchanged a worried glance as they were roughly pulled to their feet and led down the narrow corridor. The walls were cold and unyielding, the faint sound of machinery echoing around them. The soldiers' grip was firm, leaving no room for resistance. They were brought to a large chamber at the heart of the ship. At the center stood a grim platform with a massive axe resting ominously beside it. Alara's heart raced as she realized this was no ordinary room. It was an execution chamber. A high-ranking officer, his face stern and devoid of emotion, stood beside the platform. "Captain Harper, Alara of the Nor," he announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You have been found guilty of treason and rebellion. You are sentenced to death by decapitation." Alara's legs gave out, and she would have collapsed had Jack not caught her. The soldiers forced her onto the platform, her eyes wide with terror. Jack's heart pounded as he watched, helpless, his mind racing for a way to save her. "Wait!" Jack shouted, his voice desperate. "This is wrong! She's innocent!" The officer's cold gaze turned to Jack. "You are in no position to protest, Captain. You, too, will face justice for your betrayal." Alara's eyes met Jack's, filled with a mixture of fear and gratitude. "Jack," she whispered, her voice trembling, "thank you for everything." Jack's mind whirled as he was pushed towards the platform. "I'm not letting this happen," he muttered to himself, searching for anything that could turn the tide in their favor. The executioner, a hulking figure in dark armor, lifted the massive axe and positioned himself beside Alara. Her breathing was ragged, her eyes squeezing shut as she braced for the inevitable. Suddenly, a loud explosion rocked the ship, sending a tremor through the chamber. The soldiers staggered, caught off guard, and Jack seized the moment. With a burst of adrenaline, he broke free from his captors, lunging towards the executioner. "Get away from her!" Jack shouted, grabbing the axe from the executioner's hands and swinging it wildly. The executioner stumbled back, and Jack turned to Alara, cutting through her bonds with the axe. "Run!" Jack yelled, pulling her to her feet. Alara, her eyes wide with shock, scrambled off the platform and ran towards the door, Jack close behind her. The chamber erupted into chaos as soldiers tried to regain control. Jack and Alara darted through the corridors, the sound of alarms blaring around them. The ship shook with the force of another explosion, and Jack knew their time was running out. "We need to get to the escape pods," Jack said, his voice urgent. "It's our only chance." Alara nodded, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. They raced through the ship, dodging debris and evading soldiers. The path to the escape pods was fraught with danger, but they pressed on, driven by the desperate need to survive. They reached the escape pod bay just as another explosion rocked the ship, sending them sprawling to the floor. Jack scrambled to his feet, pulling Alara up beside him. The pods were in sight, and they could almost taste freedom. "Get in!" Jack shouted, shoving Alara into the nearest pod. He quickly followed, slamming the hatch shut and initiating the launch sequence. The pod's engines roared to life, and they were blasted into space, the ship's fiery wreckage falling away behind them. Jack and Alara watched as the transport ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, a fitting end to their nightmare. As the pod hurtled through the void, Jack turned to Alara, his face a mask of relief and exhaustion. "We made it," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. Alara, tears streaming down her face, nodded. "Thank you, Jack. I thought it was the end." Jack took her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "We're not out of this yet, but we have a chance now. We'll find a way." The pod drifted through the darkness, the vast expanse of space stretching out before them. Jack knew their journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a glimmer of hope. They had survived the execution, and now, together, they would face whatever came next. The escape pod floated silently through the endless expanse of space, the stars glittering like distant beacons of hope. Jack and Alara sat in the cramped confines, their hearts pounding with the adrenaline of their narrow escape. The destruction of the transport ship had left them shaken, but alive. Jack broke the silence, his voice steady but weary. "We need to find a safe place to land. The pod's distress beacon will attract attention soon enough." Alara nodded, her eyes still wide with the remnants of fear. "Where can we go? Is there any place safe for us?" Jack checked the pod's navigation system, scanning for nearby planets. "There's a neutral colony not too far from here. It's a small outpost, but they might be willing to help us. It's our best shot." Alara looked at him, her expression a mix of hope and anxiety. "Do you think they'll accept us, after everything that's happened?" "We'll make them understand," Jack said, his voice filled with determination. "We just need to get there first." He input the coordinates, and the pod's thrusters fired, propelling them toward the distant planet. The journey was tense, every minute stretching into an eternity as they watched for signs of pursuit. But finally, the blue and green orb of the colony came into view, a small haven in the vastness of space. As they approached the atmosphere, Jack contacted the colony's control center. "This is Captain Jack Harper. We're requesting emergency landing clearance." A moment later, a voice crackled over the comms. "Captain Harper, you are clear to land. Proceed to the designated coordinates." Jack guided the pod through the atmosphere, the small craft shaking as it descended. They landed on a flat plain near the outskirts of the colony, the pod settling with a soft thud. Jack and Alara stepped out, taking in the sight of their new refuge. The colony was modest, a cluster of buildings surrounded by lush greenery and distant mountains. It was a stark contrast to the devastation they had left behind on Catal. As they approached the main settlement, a group of colonists emerged to greet them, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern. An older man stepped forward, his eyes sharp and assessing. "Welcome to our colony. I am Governor Trent. What brings you here?" Jack stepped forward, his posture confident but respectful. "We're seeking asylum. This is Alara, Anor. She's been targeted for execution by the human military. I helped her escape, and now we need a place to stay." Governor Trent's eyes narrowed. "You helped an enemy of the humans? Why?" "Because she's not our enemy," Jack said, his voice firm. "She's innocent, caught up in a war she wanted no part of. We just want to find peace, to start over." The governor studied them for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. We don't turn away those in need. You can stay here, but you'll need to contribute to the community. We value hard work and trust." Jack and Alara exchanged a relieved glance. "Thank you, Governor. We'll do whatever we can to help." The colonists led them to a modest dwelling on the edge of the settlement, a place where they could start their new life. As they settled in, Alara couldn't contain her gratitude. "Thank you, Jack. I never thought I'd find a place like this." Jack smiled, his heart swelling with a mix of relief and pride. "We've been through a lot, but we made it. And now we have a chance to build something new." Days turned into weeks, and Jack and Alara integrated into the colony's life. Jack used his skills to help fortify the settlement, ensuring it would be safe from any potential threats. Alara, with her knowledge of technology, worked on improving the colony's infrastructure, bringing new ideas and solutions to old problems. Their relationship deepened as they worked side by side, sharing moments of quiet reflection and hard-earned laughter. The horrors of their past slowly faded, replaced by a sense of purpose and belonging. One evening, as the sun set over the distant mountains, Alara and Jack sat together on a hillside overlooking the colony. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, and the air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers. "Do you ever think about Catal?" Alara asked, her voice soft and contemplative. "Sometimes," Jack admitted, gazing at the horizon. "But I try not to dwell on it. What's important is what we have now, and the future we're building." Alara nodded, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "I'm grateful for this chance, Jack. I never thought I'd find someone like you, someone who would risk everything for me." Jack took her hand, his touch gentle and reassuring. "I couldn't let them take your life. You've given me a reason to keep fighting, to believe in something better." As the last rays of sunlight disappeared, they sat in comfortable silence, their hearts full of hope for the days ahead. The trials they had faced had brought them closer, forging a bond that would withstand any challenge. Together, they had found a new beginning, a place where they could heal and grow, far from the shadows of war. And in each other, they had found not just a partner, but a love that would guide them through whatever lay ahead. With the stars twinkling above, Jack and Alara embraced their future, ready to face it together, one step at a time.